Welcome to Read This Author's Corner. I am your host, Alice James, and on this episode, we will be talking to Miss Sandra Parham, who is the Library Executive Director for the Meharry Medical College. Welcome, Miss Parham.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. I have so much respect for the work you're doing. You're doing what I call a lot of legacy work. Tell me a little bit about your path to Meharry.
Well, truly, it came full circle. I'm a native Nashvilleian, graduated from Fisk, and left Fisk to go to the University of Michigan to specialize in medical librarianship. Finished the degree, came home, walked in the door of Meharry, and said, "I'm here. Do we have any job opening for a medical librarian?" They're like, "No, no, baby, we really don't." I'm like, oh my goodness. My career was based on coming back to Meharry. So, long story short, University of Michigan has a policy of if you graduate, we will find you a job. They did. As a children's librarian in Detroit, Michigan, the farthest from my goals of anything I could have thought I wanted to do. So, as it would be, left Detroit, ended up in Houston, Texas, and actually worked in the science and technology area of Houston Public Library, was getting close to the medical piece. But then took a direction toward academic libraries and went to work at one of the HBCUs, Texas Southern University.
Mm.
At Texas Southern University, as with most of our HBCUs, you do not wear one hat. So
Yeah.
not only was I over special collections, I was the archivist for Barbara Jordan, who at that time was still living. I was the curator of an African art gallery and the librarian for special collections and the university archives, probably about 4 or 5 hats. And did I mention records manager? Records manager for the university. So jumped into it, but it was probably one of the most intriguing and I'll say jobs that led to a career path that I could not have imagined. Working with Barbara Jordan, who at that time again was retired from Congress, but it left her papers to Texas Southern where she was a graduate.
Oh.
I thought it was just going to be her congressional papers. Oh no, it was her life papers. So we went from birth to Barbara Jordan's, of course, her end of life, to after that, Nikki Leland, who was her successor, which now is Sheila Jackson Lee. So it tells you how small the congressional timeline and those
Mhm.
who were congressmen were from Texas and from Houston. So with that, to raise money for the Texas Southern University Archives and Barbara Jordan, I said, let me write a book about the speeches of Barbara Jordan shortly after she passed.
Mhm.
And I did. Also produced a catalog of traditional African art, which also everything was to bring dollars into the library, into the archives. So with that uh, time period, after 20 years with Texas Southern, I moved to California, Los Angeles, a small community, Carson, California, where they needed a library dean to get off of WASP warning. And I'd worked with Saxon accreditation in the Texas Southern field. So when I get to LA, to Carson actually, Cal State Dominguez Hills,
Mhm.
we got past the WASP issues, accrediting body for that area, and then had the opportunity to build, it's still a dream to me, a $50 million library,
Wow.
which sounds like a lot of money, but Cal State Dominguez Hills was the community, the university for minority students, for
Mhm.
Hispanic and African American students. The other big schools, Northridge, Cal State LA, some of the other largest schools in the system of the Cal State University area were getting $100 million.
Oh,
We got
wow.
$50 million. They started out with 35 million. I said,
Mhm.
I don't think our community would be happy knowing that other areas were receiving 100 million, but you were giving our area 35 million. Had to give the money back, lobby for more money, and we got it. So
No.
50 million, I said, we're gonna work miracles with this 50 million. And I mean, we worked miracles. I put 3 art galleries in the space. beautiful African, Asian, Hispanic art gallery. Um, Put a grand piano on at least 3 floors because I believe pianos belong in libraries because it enables you to do programs and such. And I
Mhm.
made the archives the penthouse of the library.
Wow.
It won awards for the best library, not just in the CSU system, but in the state of California. I
Wow.
was so proud of my $50 million. I say our because it's never just one person. It was a
Of
village,
course.
and we did it. Uh,
Mhm.
it took me 15 years to kind of. No, it didn't. I was there about 15 years. I spent
Mhm.
the last 5 years of enjoying the library and decided to retire, go back home to Nashville. My mother was approaching 99. I said,
Mhm.
I need to get home to my family.
I love your passion. I love your enthusiasm. I'm going to allow us to segue a little bit now so we can talk more about your work with Barbara Jordan's papers. I know you said it started as a fundraiser, but based on just seeing your passion on things.
The book
So,
started as a fundraiser. When I met Barbara Jordan, and she at that point she was working in Austin as a professor. She was over the Barbara Jordan School of Public Affairs. So I'm sent to Austin to collect more of her items. She's collecting, I mean, she's literally going through her life history and here's a speech I forgot about, or here's a piece of, she was so humble. It was like, do you really want this piece of whatever? I'm like, yes, and tell me the story. She sits there and tells me story after story, and she was so gregarious. She wasn't that staunch, strong voice. She was like, we're gonna go to a beer party and I'm hosting so and so. And it's like, what? So I gather my daughters, and they're maybe like, I don't know, 7 and 9 or whatever. And I said, we're gonna go to Austin and we're gonna party with Barbara Jordan. And they're like, what? But that was Barbara Jordan. There were two sides to her. There was the Barbara Jordan that you see at the judiciary hearings and the Democratic convention. And then there was the Barbara Jordan was like, I'm a Texan. I love to have fun. Texas is always bigger than anything else. Any
mhm,
party in Texas is going to be bigger than any place else.
everywhere
That
else.
was Barbara Jordan. And it would have been one thing to have come there and she was deceased and just know the story. It was another to meet her and hear the stories, and then to try to select speeches that I think she would have wanted known besides just the Democratic speech and the Watergate speech. What about her speeches on immigration? What about her
Mhm.
speeches on women and migrant workers? What about, so these are the speeches that I tried to include besides the famous speeches.
Right, right.
So again, she was she was a big personality that deserved the Texas bigness that she acclaimed. But I was always challenged when you go to another state that people kind of go, and hmm. Now remember, I left Texas going to California. I get to California and I'm on archive committee and such. And I mentioned there was an archivist for Barbara Jordan, and they kind of frowned. And I'm like, I know you all know about Barbara Jordan. I'm not talking about African Americans, I'm talking about other. And it was just this kind of acknowledgement, but it wasn't that knowledge of her. So
Right.
even after I left Texas, I still promoted Texans. And Barbara Jordan was the epitome for of the tech. Ann Richards, Barbara Jordan, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Those are the
Mhm,
names that I kept spouting. Everyone knows President Johnson, of course, but
mhm.
they didn't know the relationship Barbara Jordan had with him.
Okay.
She was his hand-picked Judiciary Committee. When she said
Mhm,
what committee, he said, I'm putting you on this one. This was pre-Watergate. This is
mhm.
pre-Nixon. President Johnson said, I am putting you on the most prominent committee in Congress. She had a relationship, a love relationship with President Johnson that we're still talking about a period of just kind of coming out of segregation and such. And he embraced her like a daughter.
Mm.
I
What a
loved
beautiful
that relationship
story.
that she would tell when she would start telling the stories. She would tell you about LBJ and why she appreciated him. Uh, it was it was amazing. That piece of my life's journey in librarianship. Then when I tell students when they think librarian, they think, oh, you're going to be what, checking out books all day, or you're the quiet. That's not a librarian. I always tell them now, an archivist is one of the most important people in U.S. government. I'm promoting the field because I think a lot of times we think historians, we think writers, we even think musicians and such who tell stories. But talk to a librarian, especially talk to a librarian in an academic setting. I guarantee you, every university has a history, and especially our HBCUs. We have an HBCU alliance where we talk about what we do. Matter of fact, we send something out or send out every day that Dillard is doing this, Tennessee State is doing this, Howard is doing this. So we know what we're doing. And this was started by librarians, not the president's
Oh,
office. It's called the HBCU Librarians Alliance. All right.
wow.
So we get to know what's going on and we promote each other. Um, it's the only way you can get your knowledge of your own histories out there. Just because I'm in Nashville doesn't mean I don't know AU's history. Doesn't mean I don't know Howard. Doesn't mean
Right.
I don't know what's going on where we have our schools. So I said all that to say I come full circle when it's about telling our stories. And Barbara Jordan just happened to have been one that I was connected with. There are librarians out there who have the Langston Hughes stories, and they have the stories of our great Americans that we, at this time of the year, Black History Month, we try as best we can to promote our history while we still tell the current stories. We still, Kamala Harris and the AKAs out there waving her banner and such.
I've learned so much about librarians just in meeting you. So I thank you for that knowledge and I thank you for what you shared here because I always say our young people don't know the opportunities that are out there for them unless we show them the scope of what can be done. And there could be a lot of young people that hear what you're saying will go, oh my God, I never knew that uh, that was possible. I never understood that what she does falls under this category or under this title. You might be interested in literature and you might be interested, but you don't see yourself as a writer
Right.
or something like that. But you belong in this camp, but you don't know where.
And Alice, one thing I think I'm passionate about is us valuing our history, but
Yes,
not letting it be robbed from us.
yes.
Uh, we have proposals. I'll tell you one that came from Harvard, wanting to talk to the HBCUs, the libraries about their archives. Now, usually, most archives now are going digital. Everything's being digitized and such. We can barely afford to get it in order in a manner to process more or less digitized, but we're getting there. So within the last, I'll say 10 years, we've started digitizing our collections, small amounts at a time. I started with photographs because I just have a passion for seeing the pictures, but we have presidential papers that need to be processed and such. So Harvard came along and said to the HBCU Library Alliance, let's look at your papers, and Harvard can kind of masterly, let's have a process for digitizing. I said no. Now, they had a meeting in Atlanta, and of course, they sent a young Black man to present who was a product of an HBCU. I still said no. But what I said was, I'm not going to make a decision for my Harry. I'm going to leave it up to the administration, Dr. Hildreth, because I didn't want to make a decision that was going to impact 15 years from now. They'll say we could have had those papers digitized if we'd let
Um,
Harvard do it.
Perfect. Mhm.
I did not want a Harvard stamp on anything that was Meharry's. It's
Right,
almost like that Getty image. You have a Getty image in the background, but it's your picture. I'm like,
right,
no, no. I don't
right.
care if they could digitize everything in 2 years, it'll take me 20. I'll do 20 years rather than giving it up to Harvard, who could do it in two. And
Mhm.
it's not about not wanting to share what you have. It's about ownership of what you don't
Yes,
ever lose that ownership.
yes.
Don't ever give away what's your history. It may take us longer, it may take more fundraising, but I'm not giving it up to a Yale or Harvard or
Right.
Syracuse or whatever. It belongs to us. You value your history. You don't sell it, you don't give it
Exactly.
away, you don't loan it. It's yours. If they
Yeah.
want it, then come to me and I will share. But
Share
you're
it.
not
Right.
going to put your stamp on something that belongs to us.
I feel you. I truly, I mean, that's why so much of our stuff is lost. Is once it has somebody else's stamp on it, if they decide that they don't want to utilize it or they don't want to promote it or don't want it as a part of their repertoire anymore, then they can throw it in the trash. They can
They
do
can
whatever
erase
they
it.
want with it. They
They
can
can
erase
erase it.
it. They
They
can
can
erase
change it.
it.
They can
Yes.
have all of a sudden Harvard is in our legend of the Harry story,
Right.
It's like,
Yeah.
and it was, I'm thankful to those schools who say we want to help you preserve. Thank you. I appreciate that. Harvard and Yale and Getty Images and all of those who would like to help us preserve. But I can reserve. I just don't want to give it away. I'm not going to
Right.
give it away.
I do want to talk to you a little bit about the traditional African art catalog that you created and how did that come about? I know it probably came about as a fundraiser, right?
Well, actually, yes, during the catalog, it definitely did. But when I got to Texas Southern and I walk in the door and in the library, I kid you not, it's got to be about 100 pieces of rare African art. That's
Mhm.
Dr. John Biggers, one of Texas, again, renowned artists, Texas Southern's renowned artist, started collecting. And we started dealing with an African art collector, Mr. Dumboya. I will never forget him, would come from Nigeria with a spread of African art and say, this is, would you like to purchase this? Would you like to purchase that? But I always say, "But you got to tell me about it. I need the history to come from an African. I don't want to go and look it up in a book that a white
Right.
artist or a white person wrote
Just
about
did it
his experience in Africa because it won't be the same." They'll
same.
call a piece a fetish piece. We don't call it fetish. You
Right.
adopted that fetish name because some white collector gave it that name. So
Right.
we had the art, but I needed to know the histories.
Mhm.
So for
Okay.
each piece of art, I spent hours of time researching and going back and trying to put together what's the history of this piece. We knew where it came from, but what was it used for? Was it a utilitarian piece? Was it a mass for celebrations? What? So uh, we ended up with about $2 million worth of African art
Mm.
with no catalog.
Okay.
So I put together the catalog of African art. And again, we didn't sell it. We ended up giving it away just to promote and tell people. Honestly, very few of the works, probably except for the Barbara Jordan book, did do well. But the Meharry history and the traditional African art, and as well as the Barbara Jordan books, we gave away. We didn't want any impediment to not knowing the history. So we gave away more than we ever collected in funding, but I didn't care.
Right.
My part was to produce the information to get it out there.
Right.
Um, the Barbara Jordan book is now out of press. Uh,
I love your heart and I love I Pray Big. I got that one. I
Pray big.
received that one. I pray
Alice,
big.
receive it, and you're one too. I feel the kindred spirit. Those who love our history and appreciate it and are ready to find a means to promote it, we thank you. We thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ms. Parham, for your time. Thank you for watching Read This. And on this episode, I think we have to take into consideration the old adage, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and thank Ms. Parham for the wonderful collection of artifacts and art that she has put together in the books.